Carl Wilkerson. I'm an attorney in Arlington, Texas. The message that you all have been talking about, reaching out to young voters, is what I believe is the most important thing. Progress Texas rocks.
It's Wednesday, April 9th, 2025, and this is the Progress Texas Daily Dispatch. Rapid response on the breaking news stories Texas progressives need to know. I'm Chris Mosier. Probably the most unsurprising development in Texas politics in some time has developed as Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton has thrown his hat into the race for the U.S. Senate in a primary challenge to our senior Senator John Cornyn. Nadia Lathan at the Associated Press notes that Paxton is a close ally of Donald Trump, and thus we would say is closely tied to the insane Trump tariffs that kick into gear today, sending much of the world into financial panic. You might think that Cornyn, considering all of that, might be seeking some distance from Trump, but that's not how Republican politics work anymore. He's been doing all he can to cozy up to the dear leader, much to Paxton's entertainment. Cornyn was ready for the announcement. He came out with a statement within minutes calling Paxton a fraud, and for the 9 millionth time, harping on Paxton's 2023 impeachment on corruption charges. But that's frankly lame, as the AG has lately largely been cleared of the legal trouble he's faced for years, legal trouble that we note has done nothing to damage his performance with Texas's MAGA voting base, who also have been much impressed with his prosecutorial innovation on behalf of the hard right. Paxton has launched some of the first criminal investigations in the U.S. over abortion bans and gender-affirming care for transgender youth. He has actively opposed LGBTQ plus rights or anything even slightly remotely resembling DEI, and has a long track record of legal challenges to environmental regulations. Cornyn's maybe a little more buttoned down, but he's no saint either. Cornyn's also known as an enemy to environmental protection, has consistently opposed the strengthening of voting rights, and has a long history of resisting common sense immigration reform, opting instead to keep those problems unsolved as a Republican talking point. Put plainly, these guys both suck, and they hate each other passionately. The good news for progressives and Democrats is that a lot of Republican money is going to go into this dogfight, and the winner is going to come out with some bruises. Another layer here is the fact that while Paxton doesn't have to resign to run, announcing for the Senate does mean he can't run for re-election as Attorney General. So Ken Paxton out at AG should sound like great news, but Texas has no shortage of ambitious MAGA types who will line up most likely on platforms of out-Paxtoning Paxton. So both for the Senate and for Texas AG, who steps up for the Dems? We're interested in your ideas. Texas has become a staging ground for people rounded up for deportation across the country by ICE so far. And as far as we know, these have all been people from other countries, most here without documentation. But in a growing number of cases, people who are here legally being removed in contradiction to the legal protections they supposedly enjoy. This could be seen as a test of the fences on potentially deporting American citizens to foreign internment camps. To most of us, a horrifying notion of dystopian proportions, but apparently to Donald Trump, just another idea he's been tossing around. Jordan Rubin at MSNBC writes on White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt's casual commentary yesterday on Trump toying around with the deportation of U.S. citizens, just as that same notion was directly addressed by U.S. Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor the day before in her dissent on the SCOTUS decision to allow Trump to keep deporting people under an 18th century law, warning that Trump is on the path to removing, quote, not only non-citizens, but also United States citizens taken off the streets, forced onto planes, and confined to foreign prisons with no opportunity for redress if judicial review is denied unlawfully before removal, unquote. We should all be watching closely the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who Team Trump admits they mistakenly deported to El Salvador, but are now resisting all efforts to compel them to bring him back to his family. If SCOTUS rules against Abrego Garcia's return, precedent for deporting anyone without due process with slim chance of return will be established. Right along that line, a story from Faith Bugenhagen at the Houston Chronicle, who says administrators at both Texas A&M and UT Austin have reported that several international students at those universities have had their visas quietly revoked and legal statuses terminated without notice or significant legal reason other than stuff like traffic tickets. This is part of a Trump 2.0 trend, as it turns out, with the new regime reversing course on policies that allowed visiting students to work in the U.S. to gain professional experience after completing their coursework. This appears tied to a Trump campaign promise to actively deport foreign students who have taken part in pro-Palestinian protests. Not every day in a Texas legislative session do we see a unanimous vote in the House, but that happened yesterday as all 149 votes placed were in favor of Trey's Law, House Bill 748, which we talked about yesterday, which would void and forbid non-disclosure agreements in cases of sexual abuse and trafficking. It would appear that the big city Texas church leaders, still unnamed by the way, who, according to Scott Braddock at the Quorum Report, were working behind the scenes to kill this bill for some reason, have failed miserably in that endeavor so far. I'm still real curious as to which church leaders we're talking about here. Trey's Law is now off to the Senate, where its prospects look strong. Wish we could get that kind of agreement when it comes to doing more about our rapidly degrading climate, but wishes ain't horses, are they? Carlos Nogueros Ramos at the Texas Tribune says that while the Lone Star State is leading the nation in renewable energy, with wind and solar backed by battery storage accounting for almost all of our recent newly developed generation capacity, and ERCOT projecting overall power demand in Texas to double over the next decade, Republican Senator Lois Kolkhorst of Brenham wants to put a stop to all of that with a bill that would create vast new administrative rules on new renewable apparatus and give the Texas Public Utility Commission new power to slow that development down. Kolkhorst's main complaint is that she doesn't want to see solar panels or wind turbines dotting the Texas landscape, vast swaths of which are already plastered with pump jacks and burning methane flares, which to Kolkhorst are clearly more aesthetically pleasing. At the same time, Senator Phil King of Weatherford has filed legislation which requires 50% of the grid's energy to be dispatchable, a term that technically should apply to renewable power stored in battery facilities, which can be turned on or off at will, but has been defined in the ledge as specifically meaning power from natural gas and coal-burning sources. Told you about RFK Jr.'s visit to Texas last weekend to console the family of the second young child who is now dead due to the anti-vaccine disinformation that Kennedy himself has done so much to promote. Well, the bullshit doesn't stop there. Mary Keketos at ABC News says RFK's tweets since his visit that the rate of the ongoing Texas measles outbreak is flattening are not at all consistent with data from the Texas Department of State Health Services, which show that cases are increasing, with more counties in western Texas reporting infections. Catherine Wells, the newly famous director of public health in Lubbock, doesn't agree either. She and other public health officials project that it's going to take a year to flatten the measles curve. The Texas case count has risen as of Tuesday to 505. This curve isn't flattening, it's accelerating. Progress Texas is proud to welcome San Antonio Mayor Ron Nirenberg as our guest for a live podcast taping at our Party for Progress on Tuesday, May 6th, and you're invited. We look forward to a long overdue visit to Alamo City. Again, mark that date, Tuesday, May 6th, live pod taping with Mayor Ron Nirenberg and good fun with you in San Antonio. See the show notes and get your tickets right now. Thanks to Austin Kaplan and the Kaplan Law Firm, Julianne Reeves, Tracy Miller, and Will Judy for their generous support of our upcoming San Antonio event. Our mission at Progress Texas is to counter the conservative disinformation machine, but they far outmatch us in funding. Oil and tech billionaires and religious right-wing activist groups spend a lot of money keeping their audiences in the dark. If you've come to appreciate the light we shine on important political news in Texas on a daily, ongoing basis, please know that our regular everyday listeners form a key component of our funding, and if that's you, we could use your support as a monthly contributor, and no amount is too small. Go to progresstexas.org/donate. Thanks to Amy O'Neill, Chuck Cruz, and Alan Carroll, all of whom have joined the team lately. We appreciate all of y'all very much. That's the Progress Texas Daily Dispatch for this Wednesday, April 9th, 2025. Links to all these original stories can be found in our show notes. Progress Texas is a nonprofit rapid response media organization promoting progressive messages and actions. While campaigns come and go, we're the permanent home for progressive media and action in the Lone Star State. I'm Chris Mosier. Thanks so much for listening. Have a great day. We'll catch you again tomorrow morning.